Welcome to another episode of Artist Spotlight, the podcast. I'm your host, Mitch Stringer. As always, the podcast brought to you by your friends at the Maryland Photography Alliance, where you can check out all things going on photography related. You can check out contests and events and photo walks and just good information. So I encourage photographers in the Maryland area and elsewhere to see what they have going on. Chances are, if you take a look 1 week and then you come back a week later, there's going to be additional information that was not there previously that can be meaningful for you. So I definitely suggest that you look into that. It's a great rabbit hole to go down for something that we all enjoy, and that's this world of photography. This episode, I am joined by a gentleman from New York City who really is a phenomenal talent. And the way I became aware of him was through Instagram. And then we both share an appreciation for Leica cameras. And his portraiture is really pretty incredible to me. And I think that a lot of times portraiture, it seems like you're making pictures of people. Okay, what's different? There's a lot different. There's a whole lot different. And we're going to talk about a lot of that. And without further ado, I want to welcome Robbie Quinn to the podcast. Welcome.
Hi, Mitch. Great to be here.
Yeah, so great to have you. So you live in one of probably, if not the most photographable city in the world, just day to day in New York City. What is it like to be a photographer and live and work in that environment?
Completely spoiled. First, thank you for the very kind words of the intro. Yeah, totally spoiled. I do travel a lot. I have not been to some of the exotic places that you have been to. I want to. I'm a little uh, that seems like I would be equally spoiled. But I think every place you go, every new place, I think photographers feed on the new and exciting, even if it's just like new to them. And the thing about New York is that it is always changing, and there is always something new, or at least new to me, and so it is. It's when I travel, I come back and I'm like, wow, yeah, I'm spoiled.
Well, I imagine that this is something that applies to you because I've seen your work, and I know that a lot of our listeners are going to want to check it out as well. And that is, I believe that you, like I, live a photographic life, and I want to ask you if that's an accurate assessment. In that, when I am walking out, I'm in a city, I'm almost anywhere, I see the world around me as compositions, whether it's landscapes or it's people or it's street photography or it's portraits. And, I can stand in one spot and almost turn around 360 degrees and find at least five or six different compositions. Do you see that? Is that an occupational benefit or occupational hazard of being a photographer? Can you relate to that?
Oh, I can absolutely relate to it. Yeah, when I go out, there's I'm a full-time commercial photographer, but on my days off, I'm out on the street, and even even in work, I tend to see things. It's almost like it's kind of a cliche to say this, but like the Matrix. And I often will, before photographing anything, I'll photograph a bicycle, and I ask myself why, and I think it's just the lines and the circles. And I think photographers, or at least myself, often look at the whole world as lines and circles. A face is a circle. The building has sometimes it has curves and lines, but the bicycle, has the wheels and the spokes, and I think it's a really good launching pad for me to kind of get those initial photos off and feel relaxed and look for the next composition.
Well, as a photographer, a lot of times people, I would imagine, ask you, how you got started in that, and it's generally a real area of interest. Now, in your case, you're born essentially in or just next to New York City near JFK Airport. Ultimately, you go to Rutgers for college and you're studying music composition. And then early on, there was maybe a chance that you would be in the B 52s or you would be in your own version of the Ramones or Blondie and Talking Heads. Was so maybe kind of share those early creative musical beginnings for you.
Sure. Yeah, I had never anticipated that I'd be a photographer. I was a diehard musician. And we played CBGBs and all the places people want to play, the Cat Club in here in New York. And we got in arguments. We broke up. We were a woulda, coulda, shoulda kind of thing. I parlayed that into being a concert promoter, managing acts. And when I managed acts, they needed photos. I did the photos just out of necessity. And people started calling. And I was like, gee, okay, let's just go with this, ride it like a wave. And it hasn't hit the shore yet.
Well, you had shared with me that, when things from a promotion of musical event standpoint kind of was difficult, if not impossible, you got a call from representation from a pretty well-known name who requested you to come out and photograph a show for them out west. So what was that like to get that call and get that personal request to go shoot a show?
Uh, yeah, it's always flattering if somebody has lots of options to have lots of great photographers photograph them. And so anytime anybody selects me, whether they're a big name famous person or um, somebody that is just looking for a LinkedIn headshot to get a job. It's people have lots and lots of choices, and for any of us to be requested, it's a great honor. It's like people are entrusting you with whatever it might be, whether it's promotion for uh, a big act or if it's just somebody that is looking for a dating headshot.
I
Yeah.
remember years ago, I lived in Los Angeles and I would see the business cards and the advertisements of realtors in
Oh yeah.
LA and Beverly Hills. And everybody looked like they were part of the cast of Dynasty or Beverly
Right.
Hills 90210. I mean, I was used to at the time, a headshot was a pretty mundane thing. It was almost it was half a step or so better than a mugshot. Not these pictures. And so, in the era past that, literally was when things like Glamour Shots, the company Glamour Shots came out. You
Oh
could go to
yeah.
the mall and
Oh
you get,
man.
get your
Right.
hair sprayed and all that kind of stuff. So, with you working as a commercial photographer, when you are going to photograph, executives and so forth, either just for stock headshots or maybe a magazine is doing an article on a particular person. What are you trying to kind of bring to the table beyond just a well composed and properly lit photo?
Sure. You mentioned a really scary time in photography history, the glamour shots. There was Olin Mills, and everybody had these, um, you know, uh, backdrops that were just look like an extension of your classroom photo, and they're very stale. And I think as technology has increased, people are more and more looking for something very authentic. And for myself, what I do, whether it's the work people see on social media or the work that I do for professionals, it's it's environmental portraits. And you mentioned realtors. I've had my share of billboards that people have used for their photos. But you want to present something that really connects with an audience and very and don't get me wrong, I think there's some great studio work that people do that really show the essence of someone, and I'm always impressed with that intimate connection. Uh, but if you live in New York, and it is the city that many people dream of coming to, I still want the focus to be about the person, but the environment of New York is very inspiring. And for anybody that's doing any kind of business, or whether it's fashion or music, or if you're a lawyer or a stockbroker, New York itself really puts you on the map and worldwide. And so I take every opportunity I can to do an environmental portrait and use the city. And I'm not talking about, tourist photos where we're standing in front of the Statue of Liberty, but just the essence, the vibe of the city itself. It has lots of energy, and the light is almost always great in New York. And so I like doing that.
Well, along that line, I was talking with a photographer the other day, and the crux of the conversation was around black and white versus color photography.
Hmm. Hmm.
And, we were talking about whether it is what you're shooting or where you're shooting. Of course, it could be a combination of the two. But my
Absolutely.
my comment was that when I'm in New York City and when I'm in a lot of cities, I like black and white photography. To me, it's almost like a throwback. I think it highlights, architectural elements, and I don't know, it just has kind of a throwback look to it. Whereas if I was in a place like Miami or Rio or LA, then, so many vibrant colors. It's certainly known for that. So I might lean more towards color. Not to say that in New York or Chicago or any other city, there's not reason to shoot in color, but we were kind of just going back and forth about color versus black and white. And I know that you really enjoy color and vivid color, but do you find that there are times when you feel like this is a black and white moment or shoot versus a color one, or do you tend to just lean one way or the other?
I can tell you that uh, I probably have enough photos to do a really strong black and white book. Uh, but uh, but most of what people see from me is our color images. I think principally because my first book that I did, Street Unicorns, was about people with unique style, and uh, and of course they're using very vibrant colors.
Mhm.
So, like a Miami or LA, the color is going to play a big part. Just no matter where these people are, it's their outfits, and to leave the color out of the equation would really only tell half of the story. But there's certainly times when black and white, uh, if it's there, it's just something that you feel, and you're absolutely right about New York. It definitely has a tendency that there's certain kinds of photos here that are timeless. If you're around some of the older buildings, and they transport you uh, to another time when color photography really wasn't an option. And when you make those photos and you look at them, it does transport you. It's kind of magic.
The magic of photography. You
Yeah.
you mentioned your book Street Unicorns, and actually I have it right here with me, and it is a beautiful book. I see you have a copy as well. Yeah, it
Yeah,
is
yeah.
an absolutely beautiful book, and I think from a viewer and a reader's perspective, it really celebrates people's individuality and sense of expression and sense of who they are, through just fashion and style, whether that be their clothing, their hair, their shoes, just sort of their sort of way of walking through the world. And It's a beautifully done book. It's extremely colorful. People of every gender, every race, every walk of life, and it's really, to me, it's like a celebration of that. But how would you describe kind of the premise behind Street Unicorns?
I'm glad you see the diversity that's there. I I didn't know I was doing a book. In the beginning, I was just photographing people that I thought were interesting, and then after a while, I'm talking to them, and I saw some common denominators amongst people that were very diverse, and I wanted to help share some of their stories. And so, whereas the book, uh, and it's very complimentary for you to say, the nice photos, and it is photography, it is style. But if somebody has the book, it's only half the book if you don't read the interviews with the people, because they're expressing the why. Why are they dressed a certain way, and what are they looking to express? And through the interviews, the book is much more than photography and style. It's there. The goal of the book is to inspire people to take more risks with their own personal style, and have people not only accept but appreciate people that are different than them. And I've gotten lots of great testimonies and messages from people that have been touched by that, and um, inspired them to uh, grow as humans. And that's, I think that that's a goal of any photographer, to be able to uh, evoke a reaction from somebody that can make a difference.
I know I've had a few photos over time when people have seen the photo and said something to the effect of, that photo really hit me, or that photo really moved me. And
Sure. Yeah.
we connect with a photo on a particular level. We remember how we got to that location and made the picture, etc., maybe what we thought of it. But when you have a person who was not involved in that process, and they're looking at that photo for the first time, and they're having their own reaction, and they're just communicating that it was impactful. I think when any of us as photographers hear that, it's gratifying, to say the least, I think.
Absolutely. Absolutely. In a vocation that can be very difficult to be recognized or be seen, to have any kind of inspiration to keep going, to be moved forward. Uh, it's not entirely based upon any kind of feedback, as otherwise, I mean, we picked up the cameras all on our own, and we have our own gratification from it. But when you hear outside opinions, it helps.
Yeah, yeah, no question. It kind of amplifies the good times, and when you're in sort of a low moment, it can actually serve to pick you up. So it's great. I noticed that the cover photo was shot on Grand Street in New York City, and I wonder, for you and maybe for people who are listening, are there in your mind different parts of your city where you're likely to get people with different looks? So if you're at Wall Street, is it different than what you may get near Grand Street, or it might be different, say, that in the Upper West Side? Because people listening who live in a city or have access to a city, just because you're in one area doesn't mean that's what you're going to get for that city. If you put yourself in different areas, you can get different outcomes. Would you say that in your experience that's been the case? And if so, how has that been the case around your city?
Yeah, okay, sure. Well, first of all, I'm really impressed. I don't know how you knew that the cover was on Grand, but very perceptive or
I actually
something.
read the caption just to
Oh,
be
is it?
just to
Oh,
be
okay.
fully transparent. I read the caption, but I know Grand Street very well, so that's not only could I read the name, but I actually know exactly where that is.
It's funny that may be the first and last time I ever really photographed on Grand Street. No, no, I did. No, I did go one other time, but that was that as photographers, the unexpected photo is often the photo that is the one of
Hmm.
sorts. And I was photographing on Crosby Street, which is the
Yep.
cross street of Grand, and it was like turned the corner. I was like, this looks good. Let's just do this. And that turned out really well. Um, yeah, I think there's New York. It's not a one chapter kind of book. It's there's so many New Yorks, and you can walk 3 blocks and be in a different one. The thing for me is I particularly like to photograph in shade. It's not like I've never photographed in direct sunlight or not, but I just feel like the shade, it's a little more flattering for somebody. And if you can bring them close to an intersection, then there's a lot of ambient light that will hit their face. It's kind of like, imagine if somebody is in a garage and they slowly are coming to the entrance of that garage, then the garage is going to be dark, but right up at the edge there, their face will pop. And so I often try to use that. And as far as the location of the city for a subject, I think it depends on whether or not I want to show context or contrast. And um, I'll go back to I used to live in Nashville, and you could have a person dressed in a cowboy hat and boots, and you could put them on a bale of hay or on the railroad tracks, and that would be within context. But if I put them in the middle of the city, the contrast could really help them pop more, and a little juxtaposition.
Yeah.
And so here in New York, um, I may bring somebody that's in a suit down to the West Village, which is, very quaint and everything. And I may bring somebody that is, oh, I don't know, we'll just say kind of bohemian. I might bring them to some big office building, but shooting within context can be great too, but for street unicorns, it's almost entirely where I photograph somebody exactly where I found them. And some of the interactions for that book were lasted only 30 or 45 seconds, and then we parted ways. And it's it's just by happenstance sometimes that I see that the subject and the person all fit in one place. But when it's a commercial project, a lot of this is very well thought out. I'll know all the locations and matching the outfits to where we're going to be, and it can take a good amount of time just to plan it out to have it be an efficient photo session.
Yeah, it's funny how a lot of times with commercial photo sessions, so much of the work is done before you actually push the shutter. So much of the planning and the lighting and the, in some cases, storyboarding, and then it's very
Right.
much about executing. But
It,
uh,
it, it is, but then most photographers I've talked to, the best shots are when you kind of throw the playbook to the side on the
sure.
day of, and you see something, it inspires you, and it's like, let's try this. And those are often the money shots.
Well, something that I have seen in my limited commercial portraiture, shooting models for a clothing brand I used to own and a couple other things, is my experience was as the shoot went on, the images were getting better and better. There seemed to be a comfort level that was enhanced the more we shot. There was more relaxation. There was kind of understanding the expectations. And then sometimes the last 5 or 6 shots were the best shots of the shoot. I understand that when you are a professional portrait photographer, you may not have the flexibility to kind of warm into it. And certainly, this is your specialty. So do you find that, when you're working with, and maybe it's different when you're working with professional models versus just someone who's an accountant and you're doing headshots, but do you find that the shoot kind of improves as you go, or are you really just kind of nailing it on your first few shots because of your expertise, your preparation, etc.?
Uh, well, I'm going to say that it really does depend upon that individual. Sometimes as a photo session goes on, they overthink it. And so that first photo is sometimes one of the best.
Okay.
Other times somebody is very nervous and it does take a little time to warm up. So I don't think it really, there's not a hard and fast rule. I think as a photographer, you just need to feel it out. I do think that as I've been using film again more and more, that uh, slowing the process down and and talking things through a little bit more. Oftentimes, it's the very first photo.
Hmm.
It's and I'll take that back to times when I was doing music. I'm sure we've all heard interviews with people that are recording a song and they're very proud. They're like, I nailed it on the first take. And you wonder why. And it's oftentimes the most honest performance. And I think that translates into photography as well, often. Not always, but often.
No, that makes sense to me. Whether it's street photography or commercial photography, commercial portrait photography, is there a go-to lens for each of those? Is it the same lens? What's your thought process on what lens to use for a given situation?
It's I'm glad you asked. For the longest time, I really favored a 35 millimeter camera, or lens rather. It's I liked getting close to it and having just a slight distortion. It kind of could show movement of sorts.
Mhm.
I liked it where if I backed away, if I was photographing somebody's outfit, I could get them head to toe, especially on the street without anybody walking in front of me because I was close enough to them that there wasn't people could tell I'm actually doing a photo now. And then then the pandemic happened, and we all needed to be 6 feet away, but people still needed photos. And a lens that I usually would only use for a headshot, the 85 millimeter lens, uh, became kind of the go-to lens for me. And I was able to be 10 feet back and get a whole outfit and still come close enough at a safe distance to get a headshot with it. And now um, using that very close to get even a tighter headshot is favorable. If I'm using my Mamiya, I have a medium format RZ67. I have a 110 lens on it in a 35 millimeter world that would equate to somewhere around 55 millimeters, I guess. And I really like that. The camera has bellows on it, so theoretically, I could get like 2 inches from somebody's face and
Oh
still
wow.
get a photo. I don't, but
Yeah,
you
you could be a
can.
dermatologist at that distance.
You really could.
Yeah.
It's an impressive aspect of that one particular camera. The But I tend to want to just have one lens, whatever it might be, and stick with that throughout uh, throughout a session, just because from a storyboard standpoint, it shows like a continuum. Uh, I rarely will do a wedding, but I can remember I did one in Slovakia
Oh,
with,
wow.
and for some reason, it was okay for me to do the whole thing with a 35 millimeter lens, all
Mm.
black and white, no flash. And, I had early on, to, make a living with photography, I was photographing anything, as many photographers do, from puppies to babies to family portraits.
Sure.
And over the last 10 years, I've only done maybe 2 or 3 weddings. Uh, I usually say no, but this particular one where it was a 35 all the way through, I really thought it was like one of my best weddings I've ever done,
Mm.
just because it did have this cinematic kind of feel to it, due to the fact that not only the selection of the lens, but that there was consistency all the way through it. Whereas a lot of go-to lenses for a photographer would never be a prime if they were doing a wedding. They'd want that 24 to 70 and 70 to 200.
Yeah.
And I had often found that when I see photos from that the photos end up being at 42 millimeter, 32 millimeter, and 65 millimeter, and they're all over the place. And there's kind of a disconnect of the story, at least from my vantage point. I don't want to, say that for everyone, but I like the consistency. I mean, when you see a movie, the old movies especially, that's it's just one lens.
Yeah, and I hadn't ever really thought about that. How using the same lens throughout does give you a whether you'd say like consistency of perspective,
Hmm.
and some subjects will naturally be closer, larger, and some will be further because you're using the same lens. Um, but yeah, there would be a flow to it that there wouldn't be if you're zooming into 200 and then you're wide at
Right.
24, and yeah, no, that makes sense to me. Um, one of the things that we try to do with the podcast is not only introduce people to photographers like yourself, but also to expose people to photographers present and past. And one of the things that comes to mind with your work, your street photography work, and your book, Street Unicorns, is really a legendary New York photographer that I wanted to just raise his name and get your perspectives on, Bill Cunningham, because many credit Bill with being one of the most modest yet most impactful fashion photographers to work in New York for the duration of time that he did by raising the awareness of fashion trends and everything else. Um, do you have any thoughts on him and his contribution and what he kind of represents in fashion and sort of expression in the city?
I think I think worldwide we would be living in a very different photographic world without Bill. Bill definitely uh, brought the, to the forefront um, the idea of one of his famous quotes, or is something along the lines of the best fashion show is on the street, always has been, always will be. And before that, the fashion was on at the fashion show, and Bill, I'm very inspired by him. We I don't know that it's a fair comparison, because Bill was definitely very much focused on the style itself and what was happening within fashion within the city. Uh, he would see patterns, and whether or not everybody's wearing stripes this year, and you'd see an article that would come out at the New York Times where he had a page or many pages, and everybody would be wearing black and white stripes. Next year, everybody's wearing yellow. And he had the um, the keen insight to see these patterns happen. And that was his conversation that he was having with the public. And sometimes, he photographed people and the image was so concentrated just on the outfit that sometimes there was, you wouldn't see a person's face even, not that that was always the case, but sometimes. And for me, I think the parallel that anybody can bring is just that we both happen to be photographing people's style on the street, but his focus was really on the trends and of that nature, where I'm showing the style, but I was much more interested in the stories about the why, and not really connected to um, directly, at least to the fashion world itself. There's some other photographers along with Bill that uh, I, uh, I definitely appreciate their work, and I definitely have to mention Jamal Shabazz. He's the way I unintentionally um, I after working on my project for a while, I was looking at the way I was photographing people. And I don't know if it's just a result of being in the city and doing portraits in the city that people are just predisposed to photograph somebody a certain way. But I definitely saw some parallels of what I was doing with what he had done decades before.
Mm-hmm.
And he's I've yet to meet him, and I very much would like to. I've gone to some of his exhibitions, and he's an incredible talent.
Yeah, I was watching a documentary that I can definitely recommend to people called is it Everybody's Street, about street photographers.
Hmm.
And Ricky Powell is in there, Jamel's in there. There's just a number of photographers that are in there, and it's really fantastic. And I went down kind of a rabbit hole where I watched something about him and then bought 4 books and just couldn't wait for them to arrive.
Yeah,
One of the things that I'm sort of picking up on with you mentioned bicycles and sort of an interest or fascination with the angles and the shapes of them, and of course the book that we've been discussing, but a project that seems to be kind of in mid development, if you will, is you're photographing other photographers.
that's right.
and
Yes.
and
Well, specifically film photographers.
so specifically film photographers, and like your Street Unicorns book, this is a just a very broad swath of photographers as far as background, and as I said earlier, gender, ethnicity, etc. And it's interesting because as you look at the types of cameras, yes, they're all film, but from higher end to sort of, very consumer level. But the common thread is that clearly these folks left their home that day with every intention to find and make pictures using an analog process, which you have a great appreciation for. How did you start that? Because the portraits are really fantastic, and there's a number of them on your Instagram, and we'll give people that information later on. But what was the first kernel of an idea that you wanted to do that?
Well, like, and I relate so much to the music business of sorts, and a band can easily become a one-hit wonder. And I had put out Street Unicorns; it had sold all around the world, and I've gotten letters from Indonesia and China and Brazil and Australia and I don't know, Paris, London, everywhere. Um, and the question was uh, asked, when is Street Unicorns 2? And I was like, well, I kind of did it and I said it. I don't know how much more I want to expound on it. I feel like I did a good job with the book and I said what I wanted to say. So I'm going to do something different. And people would be like, well, what are you going to do? I'm like, I don't know. But I do remember that when my mother passed in 2016, the family uh, just supposed that I would be the most qualified to create one of those slideshows that is presented at a funeral. And
Mm.
so I accepted uh, happily, but I was rounding up the photos, and when I did, I had started out with film. I had used a Minolta X700 as my first camera, but did definitely see how workflow could be done much faster with the digital once it reached a level of quality. But I'm going back and I'm putting this slideshow together, and my father had done a lot of photos, and he used Kodachrome, and I'm looking through the slides and all the printed photos, and I'm seeing something in the photos that I'm not seeing in my own photos. And it's just something that was beyond the skill of a photographer. It was just something that was very engaging to me. And uh, I wanted that. And so here and there, I started using a film camera again. And at some point, I had bought a couple of different cameras, and I liked the results. And then about the time that I'm looking for the next project that I'm going to do, you mentioned, and I mentioned the bicycles. That was one idea, but I had like 5 or 6 different ideas for the next project that would occupy my time when I'm not doing commercial work. And um, I just started to see this phenomenon that somewhere in the last 10 years, but especially in the last 5, more and more people were going back to film. And I wanted to know why. I would just ask people, why are you using film? And there were some commonalities, but it was, there's something where I believe that in the process of us having more and more technology in the world, that um, we're presented or challenged with deciphering what is true and what is not true. And, we've all seen photoshopped images that have gone to the extreme, and then others that, um, are now are just being made within Photoshop with AI. And it's, we're being challenged to know what's true. We're being lied to by the news, by politicians, by advertisers, and I and a lot of people are doing Facetune to their
Hmm.
photos
Oh yeah.
that they do with iPhones, and I think there's a growing need or growing desire from people to have some sort of authenticity in their life. And it's not that you can't take a film photo and have it scanned and then doctor it up, but there's kind of an integrity that when people post a film photo, they often will let you know, I did this with this camera, I did it with this lens, with this film, and uh, and and I think that people appreciate that, and there has definitely been a growth in the film market to the point where I believe last year Kodak closed for a month to be able to retrofit their factory to keep up with the film demands.
Wow.
A number of camera companies are coming out with new film cameras. Your viewers won't see this, but this right here is a M6, but it's not an old M6. It's a new M6.
Wow.
After many years of not being in production, Leica, I can only imagine, knew that they were losing market share to the used market to places like
Oh yeah.
KEH down in Atlanta, and decided, well, gee, let's just make it again. And Pentax has done the same, and a couple of other camera companies. And I'd say that I don't think that it's the last hurrah in a fireworks show. I think that it's uh, going to be here for a good while. And so, a long way around the answer, but just me talking to people, I thought, I want to tell these stories and see if there can be some sort of conclusion to it. And as of today, I've photographed well over 100 people. I haven't posted that many, but what I'm doing is I'm uh, photographing people with my film camera, holding their film camera, and then featuring their work to to um, promote their work, and then interviewing them about their story, about how they came into it and why. And there are enough different angles to it that that are not only informative but entertaining, that I think people will appreciate. One of my favorite stories was early on, and I'm still mad at myself. I can't attach the story to the right photographer now because I didn't know I was doing the project at the time, but um, a young woman had been using a disposable camera, and I asked her why she was using it. And she said that her and her friends would be doing selfies with an iPhone, and everybody wanted to see what their photo looked like, and they wanted to do it again and again. And a half hour later, they're still doing selfies and not actually living. And so she got this idea that she'd get together with her friends, and they were young enough, they're all getting drunk, and they'll take the disposable camera and just do one photo, and then they get on with their lives and enjoy each other's company. She'd get the photos developed, and she wouldn't even get them scanned. She would just get prints and put them in a photo album, and then her friends would come over her house or her apartment. They'd all get drunk again, and then they'd look at the photos that they took when they were drunk. And so it's like an experience. And, a lot of people will say that they enjoy that it slows down the process for them.
Mhm.
Some people inherit the cameras from loved ones. They like using it. It lets them feel close to who they lost, and a lot of great reasons.
Well, I can tell you that speaking as a guy who about a year ago started collecting vinyl records. So
Mm,
I kind of, went back to an era in my life that I would not have ever imagined that I would have. And, it's like anything that you do, whether it's film cameras or vinyl records or, stamp collecting or whatever it is that you like to do, you find that there's a whole community around that. And,
sure.
you're making friends, you're making acquaintances, and I can definitely see how within the film community that would exist. I know I interviewed Kat Burns, who has a book that's just recently out entitled Girl World, terrific
I
book, and just
I have it on my shelf,
yeah,
autographed.
wonderful person, wonderful photographer, and she is 110% about film photography. Doesn't
Mhm.
poo-poo those who choose digital. It's just not her
No,
choice. And she's super into it, as are a lot of the other photographers that I met when I was up in New York City for Leica's 100th anniversary. Very dedicated. Many are into the film world, and I definitely see that as not only not going away, but I see the resurgence that has started probably during COVID is doing nothing but continuing, it seems.
right. That exactly. And in fact, um, I think that there's there's just such a variety of people doing it, and for different reasons. I was just thinking of I've seen a number of people now that have young, very young people that they've never owned a camera before other than the iPhone in their hand, and they have traded the iPhone in for an like an old Minolta flip camera,
Mm-hmm.
flip phone,
Yeah.
with it's a dumb phone. It's not a smartphone. It all it does is you can text with it and you can make calls. And they have that and a film camera, and they've kind of like unplugged from um, the being connected. They just want to live a real life, I think, because they've since the age of let's see, the iPhone came out in like 2007 or something. But for like if they're 20, or 22 even, they were like 5 or 6, and all they've known is digital. And um, some of them are feeling a real liberation to be able to um, just live. And I'm not downing it. I'm on my iPhone every day, but it's I can see where some people would really prefer not to be.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it definitely changes things. I know that, whether it's Hong Kong or Japan, and I'm sure there's places in the US, but there are some of these pre-owned camera stores where
Hmm.
there are many hundred, if not thousands, of pre-owned film cameras that are bought by these stores that are checked over, make sure they're functioning properly, et cetera. And it's like a kid in a candy store with some of these cameras from the 50s on forward that you can get. These aren't necessarily like high-end collectors items. These are just fully functioning cameras that happen to be quite old and still very functional. And you can walk around and buy one or two or three if you want, and it really does not cost an arm and a leg. But it's become a whole culture of camera collecting for some of these vintage, fairly basic consumer level film cameras, but people are loving them. That and also expired film. People
Hmm.
shooting with expired film just to see what the age has done to that film when they do expose the film and make pictures and see what some of the unintended effects are. Have you seen any of those kind of results from people, or people at least dabbling in that?
I had uh, somebody give me 3 rolls of Portra 160 uh, that was over 20 years old. And I'm saving 1 roll, but I used 2 of them, and same stock, same age, completely different results. And but both of them I really, really liked. The colors weren't what they were supposed to be,
Sure.
but um, but it was. I said this before. I used magical. It's definitely magical. It's there's something about it that uh, I find a really great connection. And for me, I like the process of not knowing exactly what's going to come out. Even with up to date film, you just you don't always know. There's not that instant gratification where you can look at the back of the camera and see the results, make adjustments, and get that perfect photo. I think that sometimes getting that perfect photo is really, really important in a commercial use. It's
Mhm.
going to be on a billboard or in a magazine. You want that, but I think there's a trade-off, and the I call it like a perfect imperfection. There's just something that is so engaging about the authenticity of the real world. If there's uh, a fire hydrant in the photo that you might otherwise not want in, it's okay. It's part of the story.
I remember I was in New York photographing a dancer with a photographer, Omar Z. Robles. And there was a cigarette pack that was crumpled up on the sidewalk, kind of in front of the dancer. And I went to pick it up and just throw it in the trash because I
Uh-huh.
thought, somebody littered. And Omar said, no, 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 no. It's part of the city. He said, we can pick it up.
Exactly.
He said, we can pick it up after the photo, but it's how we found this scene.
Uh-huh.
The
That's great.
authenticity, very, very specific, no, 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 it's that's how we found this location, just like this, and it made sense to me. I was thinking, be a good citizen and clean up. He's saying, no, 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 it's as we found it, which, is a fair perspective to have, that authenticity for sure.
Right, right. I mean, at the end of the day, whether somebody's using a digital camera or film camera, um, we're all looking to try to share an experience with the viewer, and it's a type of language and connect with them and um, express an emotion or a thought. And there's I don't think there's really a right or wrong. There's certainly um, I feel because film has made this comeback of sorts that there had to have been some sort of void that wasn't being filled with simply digital alone. But I think that whatever tool you can use to communicate your feeling or thought and that it's received, that then that's a successful photo. It's in music, do you use the acoustic guitar or the electric guitar? And I recently heard an interview with a singer that is very, very well accomplished and admitted that for a continuous take of a vocal take, that they would use uh, auto tune for one or two notes in the take, just to like tweak them just a little. But people that have the auto tune on for the whole song,
Mm-hmm.
are you a singer? I don't know. That's uh, there's some people that do that are making a lot of money, and a lot of people buy their records. So maybe I'm off base, maybe I'm old fashioned, but I'd
Well,
like to see.
you
Yeah,
want to you like to see the authenticity. I know I heard Billie Eilish, the singer, talking about in a given song that's recorded in the studio, she's singing the entire song, but sections of the song are recorded and then merged with other sections of the song. So for those of the audience who think that a singer is singing the song from start to end, and if they don't get it right, they sing it again from start to end. That's not how that works. If the producer likes a section of it, they'll keep that section and then have you
sure.
sing the next section until it sounds the way they want and merge that in. The challenge comes when you see that artist live,
Right.
and
That's
it
right.
it does not sound like it did on the album. And the reason is because it's like when I play golf. Can I hit a great golf shot? Yep. But that's going to be about one out of every 11. So I can string together a highlight reel, but that's not actually indicative of my golf game.
Yeah, we're on the same page. We're saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think that translates for um, if whether you're using digital or film. But the other aspect of for me using film is and many people is just the idea that uh, there's there's a tendency, I'll say, that a number of photographers have expressed that it heightens their intentionality of a photo. And I would teach in a workshop to somebody if you're going to, way before this whole um, trend of doing film, I would just ask somebody before you do the photo, why? Why are you doing it? If it's just a feeling, okay, that's valid. But it's there we should be thinking about purpose and intentionality. And I think film can heighten that in our process.
Well, I also think that, you have a lot of people who will buy a camera and set every choice on auto. So it's auto ISO, it's auto aperture, it's auto shutter speed. And, they're looking for something that looks interesting and they're pushing a button. And when that photo comes out in a way other than what they intended, they don't know why. And it's because they're
Mm-hmm.
leaving all the decision making other than the composition up to a computer. And I think that with film cameras, generally speaking, you have to make more of those creative choices, whether it is ISO to know how sensitive the film is to the light, or shutter speed, or f-stop, etc. And so by going and shooting film or taking your camera off of auto, it really requires that you understand things as basic as the exposure triangle, but put more practically, why your pictures look the way they do, for better or worse, and having your final product look the way you intended it to look. You intended it to look, not that your camera determined that it should look, to make quote unquote an average photo where everything kind of works somewhat together. Because if you want to have about a 28 or a 35 field of view, and you don't want to make any adjustments on your camera, don't buy a camera. Use your cell phone, because your
Mm-hmm.
phone is probably the smartest, most intuitive, in air quotes, camera you could have. But if you actually want to make the step to get more into photography, take it off auto, because the world will open to you and into a world of choices that your phone doesn't offer, that everything on auto doesn't offer. I know that's a little bit of a rant, but I think that, if you do decide to buy that camera, understand what it can unlock, because otherwise you're really only kind of cheating yourself, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's I'll often tell people they're like, I have this much of a budget to spend on a camera, and I want a digital camera. And until they reach a certain threshold of investment, I just say you're definitely better off with your phone.
Yeah.
If you want a digital camera and you have $500, there's no $500 camera out there that I'm aware of that can do what your phone can do.
Yeah.
And so you might as well just stick with that until you have a good enough budget. But yeah, it's I think the person that is putting everything on auto, I agree with everything you're saying. At the same time, if they're happy with it, they're happy with it,
Sure.
and they're not going to necessarily win any photography prize or anything, but that's uh, that's what they're doing. The thing that disturbs me recently, I will not be getting an Apple endorsement after this, but you know, um, the idea that it kind of unnerves me that I'm looking at my iPhone and it says that I have a setting that I'm using an f-stop of 2.8 for my photo, and I'm not. I'm not at all. It's the little tiny lenses that are in the back of our iPhones are not like a Summilux lenses,
Right.
or even Summicron lenses. They are simulating something. After you get done the photo, you can change the f-stop. Everything's in focus. You can put it up to f11, and you know it it, uh, it's just a lie, and it really doesn't. And when you put the setting to that, it's good enough for social media. You'll fool most of the people most of the time, but there is this intangible feeling that people that are looking at it, they sometimes the casual viewer won't know why that photo doesn't touch them, and the experienced photographer will definitely know why that photo doesn't touch them. And I'm not saying that we can't do some hocus pocus and get across an idea or a feeling, but it's just my opinion. I really I like I like that feeling that I had when I looked at the Kodachrome photos of yesteryear. And even, I will say, even they don't make Kodachrome anymore. And there are some film stocks that I usually will go to. I like Portra 400, the Portra 160. Uh, Sometimes I have this little tiny Pentax Auto 110 camera, and it uses 110 film. Shout out to Sissy Lou, who encouraged me to buy one. It's the camera is so bad, it's good. The photos are so bad, it's good. It really does depend upon what your subject matter is, but when you zoom in on the photo, the quality, I mean, the film, it just breaks up like an explosion,
Hmm.
and like New York, it kind of has a grit to it. I don't know that the camera would perform as well in, let's say, LA or something, but here it definitely does.
Let me ask you this as far as thoughts for amateur photographers. You have people who say, I just can't take a good portrait, or, I don't feel comfortable photographing people. What would be, a nugget or two of suggestion to, amateurs who, they either want to take portraits, or they've thought about it, but they're not fully comfortable with that sort of one person, everybody's looking at each other, and any words of advice for the amateurs on making better portraits?
Hmm. Well, beyond portraits, a basic message that I would have for somebody, and it sounds uh, cliche or something. I don't know, but people would be like, well, how do I take cool photos? And I will say, take photos of cool stuff.
There
And
you go.
that's it. And so if you're going to do a portrait of somebody, there's two aspects of this. Does somebody know the person that they're photographing? Are they hired to photograph them? Or is it, I'm thinking from your question that you're alluding to maybe just seeing somebody on the street. And
Well,
if,
even it could be even, it could be even my child needs a portrait for something at school. and
okay.
and I just need to. So it could be somebody they know, but it's almost like, do I say, all right, the classic, look here and say cheese, like that
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing is how do you, you want to show someone in a positive light. You want to show someone hopefully feeling comfortable having their picture taken. So any thoughts on maybe making the subject feel slightly at ease, and maybe making yourself feel at ease as the photographer?
Well, that that depends, I guess, upon whether or not the photo is for them or if it's for you as the photographer. If
Yeah.
it's for them, they already know why you're doing this. I will say that photographing family is it's the worst. It really is. Photographing somebody else's family, great. Your own family, they know you.
Right.
They know and they know how to push your buttons. And they know um, they know that you have this compulsion with the camera, and they roll their eyes. They're like, oh no, here we go again.
Yep.
Um, you have to choose your moments delicately. when you're going to do that. And yeah, I'm really not the person to ask about how to photograph your own family. Anybody else? Yeah, it's I think uh, I think when you know why you want to photograph somebody and you express that to them, everybody wants to be acknowledged, validated, and it might just be a matter of somebody that has really great shoes, and you say, they could be a friend, an acquaintance, but if you say, I really like your outfit today, um, I would love to photograph you. Would you like that? And they could say no. And the no is what really discourages a lot of people, a lot of
Yeah.
photographers. And, it really doesn't have anything to do with you. They just don't want it. Let it
Yeah.
go.
Right. Can't take it
Ask
personally.
ask 100 other people, and but when you have a yes and somebody really wants that, then something good can happen. That's all. But I think if the important thing is that when you're asking somebody, that you give them a reason. You don't just say, "Hi, can I photograph you?" But if you say there's something about what's going on, uh, Mitch, I really like the beard. The beard's great. And I saw you with a cigar. The beard and cigar, you look like Hemingway. Let's do a photo.
Sure.
And now you're like, oh, okay, and
Right. Yeah. Making a connection.
then we're off to the races.
Well, Robbie, I want to thank you very much for your generosity of time. I know that, your backstory is one that I think is fascinating, and just how you've evolved this career, and the focus in the different areas that you have with the book that you've done and projects that you have underway now. And I also know that people are going to want to follow your work. So let me ask you, where are the best places for people to follow your work? If people want to purchase a copy of Street Unicorns, just what's the best way to stay on top of what you have going on?
Street Unicorns is available worldwide. I mean, you just have to Google Street Unicorns, and you'll find the book. You'll also find me. Uh, as far as most social platforms, my first name is Robbie, and then Quinn, Quinn, and then NYC. So 3 N's in the middle there, Robbie Quinn, NYC, and that'll get you to me. RobbieQuinnNYC.com and wherever else.
That's great. That's great. And I know I've enjoyed tremendously meeting you, and I look forward to seeing your photography of film photographers continue to evolve, and hopefully that becomes a book, or certainly an exhibition at some point. It's just really it's inspiring. So thank you for.
Thanks. I'm looking forward to seeing you in person. You went to this build thing. There was so many people I know that went to build, and I was there for the first day, and then I was like, damn, that person was there, and so we'll have to make that happen at some point.
Definitely. I'll be back up your way before too long, I'm sure. And I want to remind all of our listeners that new episodes become available on the 1st and 15th of every month. There's always interviews going on, and we encourage you to go ahead and subscribe and like the episodes. Helps us get the word out. And if you subscribe, then the new episode comes right into your podcast server, so that you don't even have to think about it. Also reminding you that the Maryland Photography Alliance can be accessed at mdphotoalliance.org. That's the resource to check out. You can see what I have going on Instagram at Mitch Stringer Images. You can also go online to mitchstringerimages.com. Until our next episode, I wish you great light. I wish you great shooting, and we'll see you again soon. Until then, take care.